My name is Mark. In my profession, architecture, everything starts with the foundation. If it is laid incorrectly, the entire building, no matter how beautiful it may be, will eventually crack and collapse. I have dedicated my life to creating strong, reliable, bright spaces for other people. And I sincerely believe that I had built my marriage on the same principles. My union with Clara was my main project. The project of my life. We were together for 10 years, 7 of which we were married. I remember every crack in the asphalt outside the cafe where we first met. I remember how the light played in her hair when she laughed at my silly joke. From that very day, I began to build our castle. The foundation was our shared dreams and sleepless nights spent talking about everything under the sun. The load-bearing walls were trust and respect, which, it seemed to me, we had built up to the heavens. And the roof was love, the kind that protects against any storm. Clara was not just a part of my life, she was its center of gravity. She worked at a PR agency, and her world was a kaleidoscope of bright events, big names, and endless movement. My world was quieter. It consisted of drawings, calculations, and the smell of fresh concrete. I never saw this as a problem. On the contrary, we were like yin and yang, complementing each other. I was her quiet harbor, and she was my window into the turbulent ocean of life. I was never jealous. Why should I be? Jealousy is a crack in the foundation, and ours, I thought, was made of solid granite. Our 10th anniversary was approaching. Not our wedding anniversary, no. The anniversary of our meeting. For me, this day was sacred. It was the day of the Big Bang that gave birth to our universe. And I, like a possessed composer, was preparing an entire symphony for this day. The preparation took months. I started with the most important thing, the location. That tiny French bistro, Amélie, where 10 years ago, as naive 20-year-olds, we shared a crème brûlée between us. I arranged with the owner for our table by the window to be reserved just for us that evening. Then there was the gift. Clara loved The Little Prince. She could quote it by heart. After a long search through antique shops and online auctions, I found it, the first edition in French, with yellowed pages and the author's illustrations. I imagined how her eyes would sparkle when she held this relic in her hands. I took the day off work and planned the whole day. A morning walk in the park where we kissed for the first time. Lunch at the very pizzeria where we hid from the rain. And in the evening, a bistro and the theater, to see the play she had been dreaming of. I thought through every detail, every note in this symphony dedicated to her. I wasn't just in love. I was intoxicated by the anticipation of her happiness. 2 days before the big day, she walked into my office. I was finishing up a project for a country house, and I was completely absorbed in thoughts of the right lighting and ergonomics. Clara came up behind me and hugged me around the shoulders. "Mark, my love, I need to tell you something," she began, her voice unusually tense. "Just please don't be upset." I turned around in my chair. She looked genuinely distressed. Her eyebrows were furrowed, and her eyes were filled with such universal sorrow that I involuntarily braced myself for the worst. "Work is in complete chaos. We're launching a huge project for a new client, and my boss, Dan, is organizing an urgent off-site seminar for the whole team. 2 days of brainstorming. And, as luck would have it, it falls on our weekend." She spoke quickly, a little incoherently, as if reciting a memorized text. "I'm so sorry, honey. You know I would never miss our day for anything in the world. But this is incredibly important for my career. Dan said my promotion depends on this project." She looked at me, and her gaze was the embodiment of honesty. At least, that's how it seemed to me. Disappointment stung me, but I immediately suppressed it. Who was I to stand in the way of her dreams? "Of course, I understand," I said, forcing a smile. "Work is work. It's really important. We'll celebrate as soon as you get back. We'll have a double celebration. You're the best." She breathed with relief, and her kiss was warm and, as it seemed to me at the time, full of love. "I'll make it up to you, I promise. I'll call you every free minute I have." On Friday morning, I helped her carry a small suitcase to the taxi. She waved to me, and the car disappeared around the corner. I stood on the doorstep of our house, which suddenly felt very quiet and empty. In my hands I held a bouquet of her favorite peonies, which I had bought that morning. They seemed out of place and absurd. I spent our anniversary evening in deafening silence. I cancelled our reservation at the bistro, feeling like an idiot. I gave our theater tickets to an elderly couple who lived next door. At least someone else could enjoy them. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, turned on our favorite jazz, and sat in the living room, leafing through photo albums. Here we are in Paris, kissing in front of the Eiffel Tower. Here we are, covered in paint, renovating our first apartment. Here she is laughing, holding our puppy in her arms. Each photo was a brick in the wall of our castle. I looked at them and convinced myself that everything was fine. That one missed evening meant nothing in the context of 10 years of love. She didn't call. I sent her a couple of messages, but there was no response. She must be very busy, brainstorming in full swing. I thought, trying to shake off the unpleasant feeling of anxiety. Closer to midnight, desperate to fall asleep, I opened my laptop and mindlessly logged into a social network. It was a mechanical action, a way to kill time. And that action destroyed my world. Research shows that social media can negatively affect relationships, provoking jealousy and mistrust due to the constant comparison of one's life with the often embellished reality of others. I scrolled through my feed until I came across a post. It was posted by Linda, one of Clara's colleagues. A bright girl with whom we had chatted a couple of times at corporate parties. She posted a whole gallery of photos with the geotag Sosnovy Bor Country Club. The caption read, "Partying at the birthday of our inimitable boss Dan. You're the best. Hashtag happy birthday, hashtag weekend vibes, hashtag best team." My heart skipped a beat. I began feverishly scrolling through the photos. Laughing faces, champagne glasses, a lit-up pool in the background. And in the fifth photo I saw her. Clara. She was standing arm in arm with Dan himself. Her head was coquettishly tilted toward his shoulder, and her lips were playing with a smile I knew all too well. It was a smile meant only for me. His arm was confidently wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the look in her eyes as she gazed at him. There was not a hint of professional respect in that look. There was adoration. Pure, unabashed, intimate adoration. I zoomed in on the image, and the air was knocked out of me. Her ring finger, where a wedding ring should have been, was empty. She had taken it off. My crystal castle didn't just crack. It exploded, shattering into millions of microscopic, razor-sharp shards. There was no seminar. There was no rush. There was a party for her boss's birthday. There was a lie. A calculated, cynical, cruel lie. She didn't just cheat on me. Marital infidelity is one of the leading causes of divorce worldwide. But she did something worse. She desecrated our sanctuary. She took our most important day and gave it to another man. I sat in absolute silence, staring at the screen. The shock was so strong that it overwhelmed all other feelings. There was no pain, no anger. Only a ringing emptiness. Psychologists call this the first stage of trauma, denial and shock. My brain refused to accept reality. With a trembling hand, I moved the cursor to the button. One click. I took a screenshot. This file, weighing a few kilobytes, became evidence of the death of our marriage. I didn't sleep a wink. I sat in my chair until dawn, watching the night darkness outside the window give way to a gray, joyless morning. The shock gradually receded, replaced by rage. But it was not the hot, consuming rage of a vandal. It was the cold, calculated anger of an architect looking at his collapsed creation and already planning how to clear the rubble. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to smash the dishes. That would have been too predictable. I was going to dismantle our marriage. Quietly, methodically, without dust or noise. On Saturday morning, at exactly 9 o'clock, I called Arthur Harrison, the best divorce lawyer in town. I found his number on the internet. He was recommended as a surgeon. Mr. Harrison, my name is Mark. I need your help, I said into the phone in an even, emotionless voice. I'm listening, he replied in a dry, businesslike bass. I briefly explained the situation. Infidelity, he stated. Do you have any evidence? Witnesses? I have something better, I replied. I have a photograph. On Monday, I sat in his office, decorated with dark wood and leather. I silently placed my phone in front of him with the screenshot open. He stared at the image for a long time, then looked at me. In our state, infidelity can significantly affect the division of property in favor of the injured party, he said slowly. That's more than enough. What's your plan of action? I want the quickest and quietest divorce possible, I said. I want everything set in motion by the time she returns on Sunday evening. For the next few days, I turned into a robot. I began methodically erasing her presence from our home. I bought dozens of cardboard boxes. I carefully packed her things into them. Her dresses, her books, her cosmetics, her silly souvenirs from trips. I wore gloves so I wouldn't have to touch the things I once loved. I took all our photos together off the walls. The house instantly became alien, cold, faceless. Like a hotel room. I packed her favorite cup, from which she drank coffee every morning. I threw away her toothbrush. It was a ritual of purification. Dismantling. Men often cope with emotional pain through actions rather than words, immersing themselves in work or specific tasks to avoid confronting their own feelings. I contacted the bank and transferred exactly half of the funds from our joint account to my personal account. I called the realtor and instructed him to prepare the documents for the urgent sale of the house. I acted with the cold precision of a surgeon amputating a limb affected by gangrene. My emotions were locked away in the deepest basement of my soul. On Sunday evening, she returned. I heard the taxi pull up outside the house. I was sitting in the living room, in the same chair where I had watched the sunrise after my discovery. I didn't turn on the lights. The door opened. "Honey, I'm home," she sang as she entered the hallway. She flipped the light switch and froze. Her cheerful smile slowly faded from her face when she saw the rows of cardboard boxes filling the hall. She glanced at the empty walls. "Mark?" Her voice faltered. What's going on here? Have we been burgled?" She walked into the living room and saw me sitting in the semi-darkness. "What happened? Why are you sitting in the dark?" I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. At her rested, happy face. At her light tan. "I know where you were, Clara," I finally said. My voice was calm and quiet, but in the silence it sounded like a gunshot. She turned so pale that the freckles on her nose looked like dark spots. "What are you talking about? I told you, I was at a seminar. It was so exhausting." "No," I interrupted her. "Please don't. Don't humiliate us both even more." And then she broke down. She started crying. Saying that it was a terrible mistake, that she didn't understand how it happened, that Dan just took advantage of the moment, that she only loved me and always had. It was the standard set of excuses I'd heard hundreds of times in movies. The reasons for cheating are complex and varied, ranging from a search for novelty and self-esteem to deep dissatisfaction in a relationship. But at that moment, the reason wasn't important to me. The fact was important. "I've filed for divorce," I said, looking past her. "The papers from my lawyer will arrive tomorrow. Your things are packed. I've booked you a room at the Grand Hotel for a week until you find a place to live. Here's the key card." I placed the plastic card on the table. She looked at me, her eyes filled with horror and complete incomprehension. You can't," she whispered. "You can't just take everything and destroy it like this. Because of one stupid mistake? Mark, we've been together for 10 years. "Yes, we were," I confirmed, and for the first time in days, I looked her straight in the eye. "But on Friday, on our anniversary, you took those 10 years and burned them to the ground." She fell to her knees, continuing to cry, beg, and ask for forgiveness. But she was addressing a ghost. The Mark who had built a crystal castle for her no longer existed. He had died on Friday night, at 12:17 a.m., staring at his laptop screen. The divorce process was surprisingly quick and quiet. Just as I wanted. Arthur Harrison was a real surgeon. He simply provided Clara's lawyer with that very screenshot. After that, all talk of unfair division and chance for reconciliation ceased. The photo was irrefutable evidence. It deprived her of all arguments and any moral right to claim anything. We sold the house in a month. The property was divided strictly in half, although I could have claimed more. I didn't need her half. I only needed one thing: freedom. 2 months later, I held the divorce certificate in my hands. A thin sheet of paper that officially confirmed the death of my main project. We became strangers to each other, connected only by a shared past that I desperately tried to forget. I rented a loft in a former industrial area. Huge windows, brick walls, high ceilings. It was a clean, empty space. My space. At first, I lived as if in a fog. I threw myself into my work, designing new buildings, new worlds for other people, trying to hide behind someone else's walls from the ruins of my own life. The pain of betrayal is not a quick, sharp pain from a cut. It is a dull, aching pain, like a fracture. It subsides, but then returns with every change in the weather. The betrayal of a loved one is a deep existential trauma. It makes you doubt not only others, but also yourself. In your ability to understand people. In your own worth. I began to rebuild myself. Brick by brick. I started going to the gym, taking out my anger on the weights. I resumed communication with old friends whom I had neglected, having completely dissolved into marriage. I started traveling alone, discovering new cities and new facets of myself. It was a slow process of reconstruction. I learned to live alone. I learned to trust my own opinion. I learned to find joy not in someone else, but within myself. I designed a new version of Mark. More resilient. More wise. With a steel frame inside. About a year had passed since the divorce. I was sitting in my loft, working on a new project and listening to jazz. I was calm. I had almost stopped thinking about her. And then my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. But I knew immediately who it was. It consisted of a single word. Why? I looked at that word, and a wave of different feelings rose within me. Bitterness. Anger. Fatigue. I could have written her a whole novel in response. Told her about that night, about the empty house, about the pain that almost consumed me alive. I could have blamed her, cursed her, poured out everything that had built up inside me. But why? Words can be misinterpreted. Words can be manipulated. Words can be ignored. I silently opened the gallery on my phone. I found the file I had been keeping all this time, like the main piece of evidence from the crime scene. A screenshot. A photo of her, happy, carefree, and without a ring, hugging another man on our 10th anniversary. I sent her the image. Without a word. And then I blocked her number. Forever. There was no response. There was no need for one. Sometimes a single picture really is worth 1,000 words. That photo was my question and my answer. It was the beginning of the end and the end itself. It was the most complete, honest, and ruthless goodbye I was capable of. I deleted the photo from my phone. The dismantling was finally complete. I looked at the blueprint of the new building on my desk. Clean lines, bright spaces, a solid foundation. It was time to start building. From scratch.